Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Mastering fundraising endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. This podcast will share stories, tips, and guidance on the most important elements of fundraising. If you want to earn an advanced degree in fundraising, this is the podcast for you. Mastering Fundraising is a collaboration between Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership and the 5-Tool Fundraiser, two leaders in providing relevant and expert content to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. Without further delay, let's jump into the current episode. Please join me in welcoming your host for today, Chris Looney.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Mastering Fundraising, the show where we explore real-world insights and practical strategies for nonprofit leaders driving meaningful impact. Today, we have a conversation that's especially relevant for those leading campaigns and working closely with boards and chief executives. Here with me today is LaMont Hayes, a seasoned fundraising and development leader with more than 2 decades of experience guiding major campaigns and advancing nonprofit missions. He's currently serving as Associate Vice President of Development at the National WWII Museum, where he has led teams and strategies that achieved remarkable campaign results and strengthened institutional development capacity. He brings deep expertise in board engagement, campaign leadership, major gifts, and aligning fundraising efforts with organizational priorities. So welcome to the show, Lamont. We're glad you could join us.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for asking me to participate in a conversation that's something that's near and dear to me. I've been in this business for about 20 plus years, and I'm still learning. So happy to share what I may or may not know.
Yeah, well, we're all learning, myself included. That's why I'm doing the show, because I continue to want to learn from the best. So that's why we're here. So I want to know a little bit about your journey into fundraising and nonprofit leadership. What motivated you to focus your career in the fundraising field?
Sure. Well, my story is probably didn't go to school for fundraising, business, anything like that. Went to University of Maryland, go Terps, and graduated with a criminal justice degree. Figured I was going to take kind of that route, law enforcement, possibly law school. So, what did I fall back on? Well, what got me through college and put a little money in my pocket, which was waiting tables and bartending. Did that, ended up meeting a gentleman, who would probably come in the restaurant bar every Saturday, nicely dressed, usually getting off the plane, coming from somewhere, all over the country. And I remember this, like it was yesterday. And he said, well, have you ever thought about fundraising? And I was just like, what are you talking about? Like fake sales and like, balloons or whatever. And he's like, no, like major gift fundraising. And I said, okay, well, what's that? So we talked about it, kind of outlined, what, a campaign consultant does. And, there was a campaign that was, right up the road. This was, again, in Florida. And I said, oh, that's fine. I'll invite you to go out, sit with a director, and then just, kind of take notes. Did that. Seemed pretty easy. Materials were there. Get back and he offers me the job. And, the company that I'm talking about is a company, Chris, that you're familiar with, CCS Fundraising. And, Tom Hanrahan, still a good friend of mine to this day. He and I, talk often. He's the reason I got into fundraising. Remains my mentor. Anything that I see, hear, have a question about, I'm picking up the phone and calling him. But I will say, for my first assignment that he gave me, he said, all right, you're going to go to Dover. Dover, Delaware. I'm from Maryland. It must be nice. I'm coming home from Miami. And he said, no. Dover, Ohio, which is a little south of Akron and Cleveland. And so that was my very first campaign. 2 years later, I said, if I can do that, I'll give it 5. And, I'm learning more and more and more and kind of getting more interested in the business. And working with clients, all throughout the not-for-profit sector. I mean, I was doing healthcare, arts and cultural, obviously religious. So, it was something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed meeting people, and working with, executive directors, hospital, presidents, university presidents. The list goes on and on. But I've served a lot of clients, worked on a lot of projects, worked directly for a number of institutions now, all of which are very worthy of the work that's being done. So,
what experiences maybe shaped some of your understanding of donor engagement, institutional advancement? Was there some experience that you had where you can reflect back on and said, yeah, this is like, I'm starting to understand this business. I'm starting to know this business. This is such a great experience.
you are. I do, and it was a campaign in Miami. One of my first early visits on, I was kind of mirroring a director at the time, and we are going out to ask somebody for, I don't know, I think it was like $10,000. Down in Miami, heart of Coral Gables, houses are massive. So I'm probably a year into doing this now. And certainly, obviously, I have it all figured out. Young guy, I got this fundraising stuff. And so I just said, this is gonna be a slam dunk. It's gonna be easy. We're gonna get in, get out. I was quick to judge on definitely getting this gift. Quick to judge on no chance that we're getting this gift. And
Yeah. So you've led teams and major initiatives at large institutions. How do you think your leadership style has evolved over time?
I think I've maintained the kind of leadership that I began in this process. I've worked with a lot of wonderful directors, mentors, and I've kind of mirrored myself off of them. I don't want to sound like I'm the cookie cutter. I don't get involved in too much, but should something happen, I do get involved. But I honestly believe that's the way we work. I've led teams of 5 individuals, and I've led teams of campaigns of 30, and then my team here is 5 regionals, a corporate foundation, a plan giving, and for the most part, we have our weekly meetings and our one-on-ones and things like that. But I try to let my team do their work. The one area where I think I kind of have grown, but I guess I've waffled, not even grown, but was never a big fan of like metrics. And I just, I felt that metrics were something that would, hinder somebody's performance. You raise what you needed to raise, you made your calls, you had your visits, and then you would stop. Me personally, that stuff would feed me and keep me going. So that's how I figured everybody else would kind of take that.
Right. Right.
Well, over a number of years now, I've seen that that's not always the best way to kind of go about these things. But so I've kind of incorporated more metrics, and not just you're going to make 2 visits or make 2 trips a month, and have these number of asks out, but more kind of on the front end of some things, qualifying a lot of folks, getting out there, getting in front of folks. So I've brought in more numbers to help me as a leader, to help my team, if that makes any sense.
And looking back, what would you say has been one of the most formative moments in your career as a fundraiser or a manager?
I mean, certainly there's no shortage of campaigns that I can sit here and talk about that, exceeded goal, blown away goal, teams that I was a part of, but I honestly think some of the best things that the best fundraising experiences or managerial experiences that I've had, are the relationships that I build with my team. And again, I don't want to sound, like I'm just reading off a script here. But places that I've been at by 3 kind of big institutions, Xavier University, the Police Foundation here in the city, and then where I'm at now, the National WWII Museum. Um, Prior to coming in here, I wasn't married, but now I am. And the president and executive director of my last two organizations were both attendees at my wedding. So I mean, that's something that I kind of pride myself on. I think
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but something that I think that I'm most proud of in my history is the relationship that I've built with, managers and I guess I hope that team members that I'm leading, should they leave, and I'm a big proponent of, and I've told all my team, if you've got another job opportunity, if you're looking around, talk to me and I'd gladly write you a resume. And I think that you want to continue to move up and up and up. And I'm happy to do that for you. We've all been on job interviews while we've had a job. And the question is, can we contact your employer? And you're like, no, 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 they don't know I'm here. And you kind of get scared that way. And I say, let's squash all that. If you got something, let me know. And at the same time, I'm certainly going to kind of go to bat for you to stay with me because, I value your work and want you to stick around. But, I'm also not the one necessarily writing those checks. So, it's not always my department.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I think that's very special to have a supervisor or a team leader that is so understanding when it comes to people's desire to pursue opportunities, to grow in their career, to
Exactly.
understand that they need to sometimes move to grow, and for you to honor that and respect that and find a way to show them that you want them to stay and care, but not hinder their career. I think that probably sets you up as a very unique and special supervisor. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
I do want to get into the topic of our conversation today, which is on managing board and CEO involvement in a campaign. So let's dig into that.
Yep.
Let's say campaign success often hinges on strong support from the board and the CEO. And I wanted to know how you define the ideal roles of each of those in a fundraising campaign.
I think it's pretty, I don't want to say simple, but for the most part, a board's role is governance, approve a goal, approve, what we're fundraising for, and kind of like the nuts and bolts of a campaign. Um, the CEO's role is a little more complex. I mean, the CEO is certainly the lead fundraiser on any effort that you have. But the CEO is also, the one to kind of articulate those goals, strategic vision to the board to get them to approve whatever the plans are for your institution. Here, we just finished a $400 million campaign a few years ago. Ended up raising $420 million for that, but it took them upwards of 25 years. I kid with my CEO. I said, well, if you had had me 25 years ago, you would have had that campaign done in 5 years. But I didn't.
Right.
And he always laughs and kind of, says, sure, we'll go with that. But now we're in a new campaign focused on raising more endowment, less capital. I mean, the previous campaign was building all the things that we have around here now. Now we're kind of going into the educational, lifelong learners, K through 12 education. And, there is certainly some capital to that, but it's the CEO's responsibility to share that, not just with the board, but with the staff, because as we know, fundraising is all of our responsibility. So again, the CEO has kind of a two-prong. He's the visionary, but he's also the lead fundraiser. And, he's got to kind of build the culture, around that campaign.
Yeah, that's right. How do you approach preparing board members to be effective ambassadors and also effective fundraisers without overwhelming or scaring them?
Yeah. Well, board is typically going to be should be your most committed to your organization. And with that, your organization should be one of their top philanthropic priorities. More or less know why you're there to lead the organization, but also to put your resources behind that institution. And certainly we want all of our board members to they have a fiduciary responsibility when they join the board. It is, and most organizations will have that as well. You know, an annual gift at whatever level that may be. And if you're involved in a campaign, it's to kind of make a campaign gift or quote unquote a major gift if you're not a campaign.
Yeah. Are there common challenges that you've come up against when kind of aligning board members and the CEO around campaign goals, expectations for their involvement, the work that they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, fundraising is not for everyone. We see that on boards, and in addition to board members making their fiduciary responsibilities, I mean, we certainly will want our board members to kind of introduce us to their friends and get us in their circle, and if they're have the capacity to make significant leadership style or type philanthropic gifts, we would like to know some of those others in their circle who are able to make similar type gifts. And so I do find when I'm working with board members, certainly you're going to have your board members who are a little more active, and then those that kind of just are on board and kind of on board in name only. So, those will tend to bubble up sooner rather than later. The board member who's going to call you every 5 minutes, or the board member who you're going to have to call multiple times, to remind about a meeting, to remind about whatever it may be. So I think in getting a trustee, a board member comfortable with telling the story, the mission first, and most of our board members, I'm going to speak from my experience, can do that. I've gone on many visits with trustees who say, I don't want to ask anything about money. This is my good friend, whatever it is. But I'll tell the story till the cows come home. And I say, that's great. That's why I'm here. I can be your fundraiser. I can ask for, $1. I can ask for, $100 million. But I know that none of it's going along. So that kind of tends to ease a trustee's mind. Like, okay, well, we're talking about something that I'm very passionate about, and we're just kind of sharing that story with whomever there is. So I think, what we can do in helping them get comfortable. Certainly, you want to manage their expectations. I'm not trying to, I've got a $300 million campaign. I'm not asking you to go out and raise $300 million. We each want to do our part, and here's how I think that you can be effective.
Yeah, very good. Very good. What strategies in your mind help ensure the CEO is not just visible in a campaign, but actively engaged in ways that drive the results that you're chasing?
Well, my CEO is maybe a little different than many. He is the true kind of bag room to CEO story. This museum is now 27 years old, and he's been here roughly 26 years. So I think I'm fortunate that my CEO understands fundraising and truly enjoys fundraising. So yes, for me to be effective for him is to not waste his time.
Good.
I want him to believe in me that, the minimal interactions that he might have had with a prospect is much more involved than I am. I know where this prospect wants to see their philanthropy, what kind of investment they want to make, what number that is, and then certainly provide, my CEO with ample packets of materials to get them comfortable. So I think getting, not just the board comfortable, but getting your CEO comfortable in a different way. We're going to go ask for $5 million. Here's why. Here's the gifts that this individual has made similar to that. And I think, I see my CEO's face kind of like, all right, well, let's go do this.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. That's the best case scenario when you can get the CEO to arrive at that moment where they're feeling like the time that they're investing is going to be productive, not wasted,
That's
that
right.
you're going to take care of all the details, that you're going to position them for success, that there are not going to be any surprises, that you can't avoid some failures, but the vast majority of the exchanges are going to be more successful than not, right?
That's
And
right.
and I think that that probably also is um, valuable for most individual volunteers who have maybe even less time for this particular mission because it's not their
That's right.
full-time job.
That's right.
Um, in terms of communication practices, what have you found that helps build trust and shared ownership among board, CEO, and development staff? Like, what tips and tricks do you have related to communications?
For me, things that I found effective in communicating with not just CEOs but boards but volunteers. You know, a simple kind of dashboard of some sort that maps out exactly where we are in a campaign, how many asks we have out, how many asks that we need. Me personally, I'm a numbers guy, so I tend to overload a lot of times on these dashboards. Um, but communication wise is something as simple as picking up the phone and talking to a board member,
Yeah.
not just about what they are working on, but what has happened in the campaign. We got a great gift. I think we should know about this. And 9 times out of 10, I hear a volunteer, a board member's kind of voice perk up. Oh, that's great. So yes, for this campaign, and maybe we should go ask for more. Go ask more people to participate in this because people are considering this and are jumping on board. Um, so that's kind of but with all of the in person, the personal kind of outreach that we do, I mean, it's nice to read a progress report or some kind of campaign focused materials just to kind of let you know where you are.
Like what you said about the good news or sharing good
Right.
news. It's amazing how board members respond so positively to the success of other board members and learning from them. So, providing an example of how a board member successfully um, gave a tour to a colleague and how that resulted in a gift and how simple it was. Just that modeling, that example, sharing that can encourage the right kind of activity. And it all stems from a willingness to communicate.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's not just about kind of numbers and reading a report. It's as simple as one thing that I have our institutional advancement chair do is, I mean, I'm giving him a report, but here are the things that here are the highlights that you need to know. This trustee sent 6 visitors to the museum over the last 12 months. And 3 of those have resulted in an annual membership, a 5-star society membership. I'd like for you to reach out to this trustee and say, hey, great job. Keep it up, keep it coming, because the work that you're doing by introducing, the museum, to your friends is working. So it's not just, a LaMont focused kind of communication effort. Yes, I'm
Yeah.
maybe in the background kind of driving that train, but it's I find it tends to be more effective if a peer picks up the phone and says, hey, congratulations. So anyhow,
How do you kind of handle those situations where there just isn't alignment?
but years and years ago, I worked pretty closely with a donor, knew, what the strategic plan was. It was a tennis court that we wanted to raise money for, and was not at all what the donor wanted to consider. I'm going to let you know that we did not get the tennis court built because, that was not us listening to our prospects, to our donors. How could we have better worked, or managed that that situation. I think there's plenty of ways that we could have done that. Um, I think we could have maybe not been so aggressive in our time, look for other funding sources to, again, give credibility to, again, a tennis court. So I think that there's ways that you can certainly go around about finding a prospect who is not certainly leaning towards where you want to go, but you can, in the end, get them there.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's great. And what lessons have you learned from past campaigns about maintaining relationships with board members and the CEO after the campaign closes? Presumably, um, that's not the end of their involvement in the organization, and there's bound to be future fundraising needs. So,
That's right. As any fundraiser will say, your gift is as good as your until your next one. And so we're always going to be fundraising, and I think as you should. I mean, we just finished a capital campaign here, and we've started a new campaign, and we are going to encounter some folks that have made transformational gifts and are not going to do that in your second campaign. But will they support it because it is, the thing that or the organization institution that they've made probably their top philanthropic priority at one point in their career? I tend to think that they will. So, we have a really good kind of an alumni with our trustees. They're constantly getting, board or CEO updates. I think it's a lot. It's incumbent on the directors to kind of maintain that relationship. Every good campaign director should have prospects and qualification, cultivation, solicitation, and then certainly stewardship. And so, you don't want to have your whole portfolio in stewardship, but you want to, have an eye on some of those individuals who made significant gifts to your organization, and who certainly have the capacity to do more at a given time. And we've encountered that for this campaign that we're in. Many of our lead donors from our previous campaign may not be lead donors to this, but are certainly going to be donors. And I think it's just staying in touch with them. You've given to us annually for the time that you're on your board. We'd love for you to continue doing that again. It's going to give you, all the stewardship touches that we get. You're going to get the phone calls, the pins, the books, the whatever else, And I think that they value that, and they still maintain a relationship with us here at the museum. And one of the ways that they do that is by introducing their friends. And hey, I was on the board there, and from '96 to 2004. Love for you to go, check out this place. It's grown, significantly since I've been here.
right.
So, I think that's that's really, really helpful to institutions to stay in touch with your donors. Whether don't forget them. They make a gift, and it's a big gift. It's a small gift. It's a medium gift. That small gift could become a big gift. But everybody wants to feel a little special. Stay special.
Words to live by. Yeah, words to live. That's for sure. Nothing probably more genius has ever been said by a fundraiser than people want to feel special.
Sure.
And there's a magic in the way that you and other development officers, but the CEO, board members can contribute to making a donor or a prospective donor feel special and want to do more. And so thank you for highlighting that. What are the tools of the trade for you as a campaign kind of director, manager, campaign leader? What do you essentially need to manage the effort? You mentioned dashboards.
Yep.
I think that's a given, right? I mean, to be able to show people an illustration of where things are, where you need to go. What are some of the tools that are most important to you?
Outside of kind of your traditional campaign scorecard, kind of clear role charters, for everyone involved in campaigns. Whether it's your staff that's going to be tasked with raising the majority of this campaign, but then certainly working with your trustees, your board members, um, cabinet members of your institution. Again, fundraising is not just LaMont and the development team. It is everyone involved across the enterprise, as we say here. Ambiguity creates kind of friction, and clarity creates accountability.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what are the things that you do with board members or even CEOs to kind of um, help them connect their passion with the experience that they need or the awareness of what they need to be a successful and effective fundraiser in a campaign? What are the things that you teach them? What are the things that you want them to know?
Certainly be knowledgeable about kind of the pillars of any effort that we're going for, that we are fundraising for, and then not just in the campaign, but we have a $300 million campaign here, but we also have a $35 million kind of organizational and department goal.
Are there particular moments in a campaign timeline when engagement efforts with the board and the CEO are most critical?
But certainly the first year, 2 years, of any effort, and that does involve them making their own, personal gift to the effort. I always say that, questions that have come to me from donors. I've asked for support. Well, how involved is the board? How much have they raised? Folks want to know this. Our donors are smart. If your board's not 100% committed to this effort, why are you asking me to lead this thing? So the early parts of a campaign are certainly more important, are very important in a campaign for me. And board members can help, by making their gift, and certainly by introducing, us to, all of their friends in their circle.
Yeah, that's such important advice. And speaking of advice, last question for today. What advice would you give to a development leader that's kind of entering into this new world of campaign fundraising and wants to really effectively work with their CEO and effectively work with their board? What are the important things that you want them to know and want to tell them as they want to get off to the best possible start?
Sure. So one of the things that I think I've found most effective in working with my CEO, and I think this will hold true with anyone, is CEOs are busy. And I think when I kind of first got involved in doing this business, I was a consultant. I wasn't a staff member. So I was of the mindset, hey, you're paying us for something. So if I'm going to knock on your door and barge in your office and, hey, this is, I need something now, you're paying me for that. Well, now I'm a staff member, and I've had to kind of rethink that model. And I understand why. The CEO is the leader of this organization, not just my department. And so the more prep time that I can give my CEO, the more effective he's going to be, as opposed to he and I getting on a plane, sitting in an airport, and me saying, here you go, here's information on who we're going to go see and why and what we're going to ask. At the time, that just never works. So I have found, and I think the best advice I can give is to manage your time and managing your CEO's time. And that's one thing that I have to do. Block off times on my calendar. If I know I'm traveling with my CEO in a month, I'm going to prepare my CEO, weeks in advance, because there's nothing that's really going to change in, 2 or 3 weeks prior to travel. Now I know that I'm going to have to share the same materials with my CEO again before we head out. It's a refresher of that thing. One thing I also like to do is get in front of my CEO. I know that he's got our collections, our education, our membership, all these departments, not just LaMont. It's not a one-on-one relationship here, and so that's something that I've taken a step back. And that's not just here, but that's many places that I've been. I just understand how busy CEOs and presidents can be. And if I can give them ample time, I think it works out in the end for us, because they become, comfortable with what we're doing or where we're going. And they're a little more effective that way.
Any different advice or strategy with the board members?
I think board members are equally, as busy. Most board members are CEOs themselves, running their own companies. And so they've got, their own personal lives or family, what have you. So I just feel that time is probably the best thing that you can give anyone, trustee, CEO, again, for them to be effective, in what we hope to accomplish. So I think, again, time for a trustee is just as important as time for a CEO.
LaMont, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a wonderful conversation. I think there's been a lot that you've offered to the audience that they can take away and begin using immediately with their CEOs, with their board members, especially when they're contemplating a campaign or trying to really work most effectively with their CEOs and their board members during a campaign. To the audience, thank you for joining us. If this content has been helpful, please like and subscribe. Please also check out our two other podcasts. We have Lead for Good, and we also have The Nonprofit Edge. In all three of our podcasts, we interview the most extraordinary nonprofit leaders that are out there in the sector and really dig into core competencies of theirs, explore their leadership journey, and try to learn, because we're all lifelong learners and attempting to impact the communities and the organizations we serve in new and extraordinary ways. So until next time, thanks again for joining us. We'll see you very soon.
Thank you for joining this episode of Mastering Fundraising. We hope the conversation was helpful and invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast for more conversations with extraordinary nonprofit and fundraising leaders. To learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership, please visit us on the web at fulcrumleader.com. To learn more about the 5-Tool Fundraiser, please visit us at 5toolfundraiser.com. We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Thank you for the important work you do to make our world stronger. We look forward to welcoming you back during a future podcast. In the meantime, take care and be well.